Welcome to Donu's Week, which is about what I've been up to for the past 7 days, the people I've interacted with, the places I've been to, the things I've done and not done, and the thoughts I've had. Hello everyone, thank God it's Friday. Welcome to Donu's Week. I should say welcome to Donu's fortnight, because I didn't put out a video last Friday. I think that may be the first time I've ever missed an episode completely for a whole week. But anyway, the reason for it was that I was on holiday and I didn't travel with Emmanuel, my social media assistant who normally organizes all the filming and editing and blah, blah. And I just decided to take a break, and I couldn't be bothered to organize a video by myself. But I'm still kind of half on holiday, but I'm back into the working frame of mind. And here I am. So let me tell you what I've been up to for the past couple of weeks. Okay, so I left Nigeria just over 2 weeks ago, and arrived in London, where I was met by my son, Oliver, who lives in Los Angeles. And we spent a couple of days together in London, staying with my sister, my lovely sister Layla, and the three of us went to see my lovely brother Poage, who lives in a care home in London. He's been unwell for many years. He's had mental and physical challenges, but he's in fairly good shape at the moment, quite lively and calm and a bit too thin for my liking. But, it was just wonderful to see him and Oliver together. They hadn't seen each other for about, at least 5 years. That was great and brought tears to my eyes. And then, by the way, some of you will be wondering why I didn't start this week's video with an update on my health, my diabetes and my weight problems and my other problems, of which there are many. And that's because I'm going to talk about my health in the food for thought section this week. So I'll talk about it at the end of this video. Right, so following that very touching reunion between my brother and his nephew, my son, Oliver and I then took off to Europe. Actually, I went to France first, to the south of France, to a place called Biot near Antibes, which is also near Monaco, Monte Carlo, Nice, Cannes, Saint-Tropez, all those glamorous places on the French Riviera, or the Côte d'Azur, as it is known locally. Definitely the most glamorous part of France. I think most people will have heard of the Cannes Film Festival, which happens every year. Almost everybody must have heard of Monaco, which is, a famous place for rich people and famous for the Grand Prix, the motor racing. I think they call it Formula One. And then also famous because that beautiful American actress, that classy, gorgeous American actress, Grace Kelly, married Prince Rainier of Monaco in the 1950s. She left her Hollywood career behind and married a prince. And she's still revered today in that space. Across the world, but the Monegasques, the Monaco people really, really, really loved her and still do. So, actually, let me just say, as a sidebar, that it just suddenly occurred to me, actress marries European prince. American actress marries European prince. What does that remind you of? Meghan Markle and Prince Harry of the United Kingdom. And, it's amazing when you compare how Grace Kelly managed this challenge of marrying a European prince and how Meghan has managed it. There's no comparison. Princess Grace puts Meghan to shame. Sadly, she died in a car accident, so she's no longer with us. But, you know, I do still speak of her in the present tense because she was such a big part of my childhood in those days. You know, we all looked up to Princess Grace when I was growing up in the UK. And, you know, the funny thing is that Grace Kelly was a real Hollywood star. She was a mega star. She was a global superstar and icon. And Meghan was nowhere near as famous or successful as she was in the acting business, and yet has behaved in so much more regal and pretentious a way. You know, Meghan has a lot less to shout about and should have been a lot more, I'm sorry, a lot of people will be upset with me for saying this, should have been a lot more grateful for the elevation she gained when she married into a royal family. She should have used Princess Grace as her role model. Anyway, back to my holiday. So, I stayed with some fabulous friends, Paul and Fanette Newman. Paul is English, Fanette is French. I've known them for years and years and years, since we were young. Fanette, you should be seeing at this point a picture of me and Fanette with a couple of girlfriends when we were younger. You will take note of the fact that she looks exactly the same now as she did 30 years ago. Actually, it's more like 40 years maybe. And whereas I look completely different, so I have aged much worse than Fanette has. And we're still friends. She came to the UK and she married my friend Paul. And we've all been together ever since. And they've got this, they live in London, but they also have this house in Biot, near Antibes, which is famous for the jazz festival, an annual jazz festival. It's just a really wonderful part of France. I always say it's full of happy, shiny, rich people. You know, I'm not saying that rich people are better than everybody else. I'm just saying, well, if you've got money, you tend to look a bit more contented and you know, glossy. And so that part of of France it's a very relaxing place to be, because you don't sort of like see too much misery and poverty and all those things that can be so depressing if you care about humanity. So really enjoyed myself. Paul and Fanette are wonderful people. We went off we had pedicures, we had a lovely dinner overlooking the sea, and they live a charmed life when they're out there, going to all these well-known glamour spots like the famous hotels, and they go sailing, and it's just all so wonderful. So I spent like 4 days with them, and that was just, so relaxing. And then I flew across to Spain. Yes. So, with considerable reluctance, I left the south of France behind me a few days ago and flew to Spain through Barcelona to Bilbao, which is where my amazing goddaughter Gabriela was having her white wedding in a church. Her family comes from that area. Her father's Spanish, her mother is Anglo-Dutch, and you might recall that I showed regular viewers, long-term viewers of Donu's World, a video of her traditional wedding, which she did in Nigeria last December. When I say traditional, I mean traditional Nigerian wedding, almost traditional Nigerian wedding. So she did this wedding in Nigeria, which is very similar to what Nigerians do when they get married in the traditional way. Sorry, I'm not very articulate today. And she married a really, really sweet, intelligent, successful French guy called Thomas. But, you know, we're all Catholics, so that wedding last December in Abuja, which if you scroll back to last December, you will see the video of the court and Nigerian wedding. It was great fun, but really for us, the marriage was properly solemnized and properly confirmed when she got married in church in Spain last weekend. I'm going to show you a few pictures. And if I can get my hands on a nice jazzed up summary of the whole Spanish event or wedding, I will certainly post it for you to see. So my son met me in Spain because he didn't come to France with me because Paul and Fanette, their son wasn't around, so Oliver felt that he would have more fun if Edouard was around. So he left the oldies, that's me, Fanette, and Paul, to do the whole friendship thing on our own. And then he met me in Bilbao, where there were loads of people of his age, because Gabriela is exactly the same age, the bride, as Oliver, because they became friends in kindergarten. They were in the same class from the age of about 4. They're still together after all these years. She lives in Nigeria, he lives in Los Angeles, but they're in regular contact. He's also close to Carlotta, Gabriela's lovely sister, who of course was there and was the chief bridesmaid, maid of honor. And it was just a tear-jerking, fantabulous experience. Carol and Miguel, the parents, did us proud. I mean, honestly, the whole thing was so beautifully organized. And Thomas's French relatives flew in, and his mother's American, so we had quite a few American guests as well, including his inimitable honorary grandmother, Bundles, and honestly, I'm almost speechless. It was such a beautiful, lovely experience. The young people were buzzing, the old people were joyful. At times we came together, at times the young did their own thing and the olds did their own thing, but it was just a fantastic melange, whatever you want to call it, of the generations celebrating the happiness of a young couple who are ideally suited to each other. And I'm the godmother, Gabriela's godmother, and I've warned her she mustn't ever think about becoming a divorcee like me. I never wanted to be a divorcee. It's a long story. Maybe one day I'll tell the story in more detail. But, as I've said before, being on your own in your 50s, 60s, 40s, it is not fun, okay? So if you can possibly avoid divorce, please do, because divorce is not for the faint-hearted. Aloneness in old age is not for the faint-hearted. I'm okay, but I think I'd have been better if my marriage had worked out. And I am praying. I said the prayer at the reception. I pray for a long and happy marriage for Gabriela and Thomas. Okay? So, there's just been so many, exciting things happening these past few days. So, I think what I'm going to do is, I'll give a couple of shout outs that are not to do with the holiday directly. When I was at Gatwick Airport in London, getting ready to fly to France, who should I chance upon but the Nigerian Minister of Aviation? That is the man who is in charge of Nigerian airports. So I met him in the British airport, I bumped into him, and he was there with his family. Very modest, very unobtrusive, not throwing his weight around like a lot of Nigerian VIPs do when they're abroad. Not doing, do you know who I am? Not doing, I'm a big shot. Honestly, you wouldn't have noticed him in a crowd. I only noticed him because I know him. And so I went up to him and I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, Festus, and he looked very surprised to see me. And so I congratulated him on a job well done, because, I'm always very negative about government people, but some of them are actually fine. I don't like President Tinubu, and some of his ministers, like the Minister for Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike. I've been friendly with him in the past, but I'm very angry with him at the moment. But, the Minister of Aviation, sorry, I should have mentioned his name at the beginning, is called Festus Keyamo, okay? You should see a picture of him coming up on the screen now. Okay, so Festus Keyamo is a lawyer, and he's the Minister of Aviation, and he's not a show-off, and he's quietly doing a perfectly good job, to the best of my knowledge. Not like the last Minister of Aviation, who was something of a disappointment, in fact, a massive disappointment. So I congratulated him. I said, well done. I don't like your boss much, that's the president. He said, I know. And I said, but you're doing fine, keep up the good work. So shout out for Festus. He was there with his kids like a normal dad, normal husband. Well, I won't say husband because I didn't see his wife. And I can't make presumptions about his personal life, but I assume he was there with his wife. But anyway, the children were there. And by the way, he was also in a section of the Gatwick Airport that's reserved for budget airlines. So not only was he there quietly queuing up like anybody else, he was on one of those airlines where, they don't cost much, cheap ones. And he said he was on his way to Paris. Now, if you're on your way to Paris, Paris is a major destination. You can get a really classy airline, Air France or British Airways. Well, I wouldn't say they were particularly classy, but they're classier than some of the budget airlines that I will not mention in case they sue me for saying that they are crap. Anyway, I use them because they're cheap and cheerful. And, I was pleasantly surprised to discover that the Minister of Aviation of Nigeria also uses them. To people from normal countries, this may seem like a normal thing to do, but in Nigeria, VIPs don't normally behave like normal people, so it was nice to see. Okay, so now we come to the weekly segment where I call Food for Thought, where I talk about things that are thought-provoking, things that have made me think deeply, and I think should make everybody else think deeply. And I would like to say, this week I'm going to basically turn the video on its head, because normally I do a health update at the beginning, so I'm doing a health update now. I didn't make my target for this European holiday in terms of weight loss, joint pain and all those things. What I mean by that is that I started in May. When I got a diabetes diagnosis, I started to take weight loss, the need to lose weight and improve my health generally. I started to be more consistent about it because, on and off, ever since I developed this weight problem, on and off, I've tried at intervals to lose the weight and whatever. But, I always go back to being bad because it's easier to just sit down and eat a tub of ice cream or cheesecake or whatever it is. So it's only since I was told in May that in April actually, sorry guys, that I had diabetes, that I thought, what? This time I'm going to take the need to lose weight seriously and I'm going to stick to it. I mean, I might have 1 or 2 bad days or weeks, but I'm not going to use that as an excuse to go back to being totally unhealthy. So I've been quite good since May. I've lost 20 kilos, and I knew Gabriella's wedding was coming up in Spain. I've known for months, and my dream was to arrive in Spain looking a lot better than I have for years and able to wear one of the beautiful designer outfits that are hanging in my wardrobe and that I've not been able to wear for about 6 years or 7 years or something. Not just designer outfits. I only mention designer because, I do think designer clothes tend to be exquisitely made and very carefully tailored. But you can get cheaper clothes that are very nice as well, and I have some of those also. Anyway, my dream was to arrive in Spain at least 40, looking a lot better than I did. But unfortunately, when you've got this much weight to lose, 20 kilos doesn't really show. And I've still got a long way to go before I start to look significantly different. And so I was quite depressed for a little while because I just thought, honestly, the women were just gorgeously attired. Not just the young women, but the women of my age as well. Carol, the mother of the bride, Bonnie, my friends, Mary Lou, Eugenia. There were so many women of my age who looked absolutely fantastic, okay? So, it wasn't just the actual wedding, which was last Saturday. There was also a couple of things that happened before, like a cocktail on a rooftop in Bilbao the day before, and, things, dinners and things. And I was tempted to slide into a sort of slightly gloomy frame of mind. But, I was shown so much love by Gabriella, her husband, Thomas, her parents, the friends, my son, Oliver, who was there with me. We actually shared a hotel room, much to his chagrin, actually, because he was hoping to have a room to himself. But I thought, too expensive, so I was a bit cheap. So we got a twin bedroom. But anyway, I got so much love from the people around me that it reminded me that even if you fail to meet your targets in life, there's more to life than always winning every game, and perfection is not the only source of joy. So I wasn't able to wear the sort of clothes I wanted to wear to this event in Spain. And in fact, I was already very self-conscious about my obesity, because in France, where I was with Paul and Fanette, Paul is, a straight-talking kind of guy, and Fanette is very diplomatic, but Paul doesn't pull any punches. He said to me, "Why? You're so fat, you've just got to do something about this." Paul made me feel so bad. But that's the food for thought, It's funny. They say that you shouldn't fat shame people, and you shouldn't make them feel bad, and that you yourself, as a fat person, shouldn't develop an inferiority complex or low self-esteem, even if you're not able to solve your weight problem. You should see yourself as a person of worth and substance, even if you're not able to slim down. But I've actually concluded that it is good to make people feel bad about being obese. Paul was almost rude, but he did it out of love. And I think it's a good idea for people to kick you up the backside and say, "Look, you're not doing well enough. Get moving." So I said to him, "Well, I've lost 20 kilos since May." And he said, "Well, you've got a lot more to go." And, that made me think, well, yes, I do. So I think it's fine for people to fat shame you out of love. And it's good for you to fat shame yourself. I look in the mirror and I just think, geez, gotta do something about this. I don't cut myself any slack on this issue, okay? So, yeah, I'll tell you, there was one victory. I did not need a seatbelt extension on the plane, because in the past few years, normally when I fly, I have to ask for an extra bit of seatbelt to go around my stomach. But this time, my stomach's gone down enough for that not to be necessary. Another thing that I observed was that I didn't need... Anyway, I won't go into too many details because I am going to talk about this whole health and weight thing at greater length in future episodes of Donu's Week. But the food for thought is, body shaming can be good, whether other people do it to you or you do it to yourself. Now, even if other people do it to you out of malice rather than love, it's actually not a bad idea to be told the bitter truth, which is that you don't look as good as you could look. And perhaps more importantly, you are risking your life. For example, if you've got a big stomach, it's full of visceral fat swirling around your internal body system, encasing your organs. You're risking heart disease, you're risking stroke, you're risking dementia. The list of illnesses you can get just from being too fat is, it's so long. And anybody says, oh, don't worry about it, it's not your fault. Well, actually, it is your fault, because there's always something you can do about this weight problem, unless you have a very, very unusual type of disease or problem. Please forgive me, anybody who genuinely cannot lose weight, maybe they're in a wheelchair or whatever, please forgive me. I am not talking about people like you who are in the minority anyway. I'm talking about people like me, who you can use weight loss injections, you can go on diets, you can fast, you can do more exercise. For most people who are very fat, or even there's always something they can do to improve their situation. And the thought for today, the food for thought really is, look, don't kid yourself. Tough love. Love yourself toughly. And whether other people are telling you that you look bad or that you're risking your health, whether they're saying it nicely or nastily, they're doing you a favor. And don't use that as an excuse to descend into depression. I can't do anything, I'm so depressed, everybody's being so nasty to me. Use it as an incentive to get off your backside and solve the problem, okay? I am going to talk more and more about this. It's about mobility, it's about joint pain. I'm still struggling with pains in my knees because I haven't lost enough weight yet. Yes, 20 kilos is pretty good. Yes, it's excellent that I didn't need seat extensions. I don't need seat extensions anymore on aeroplanes, but I've still got a long way to go. The only thing I look halfway decent in is caftans because they cover all the blubber. I have mobility issues, my quality of life, enough already. I am going to soldier on, and I hope that if there's another big event around Christmas, I will look a lot better than I do now and feel a lot better than I do now. And I am planning to go back to the south of France next summer, and I hope that Paul Newman will look at me proudly and say, that's my friend Donu. She had the guts and the self-esteem to solve a serious problem that could have cost her her life. So, we'll continue our Donu's Week stories next Friday, and thank you very much for tuning in to this extra specially long edition.